They thought it would be funny. To them, Marcus Greene was still the same boy they remembered from 5 years ago, the shy black kid who never fit in, who kept to himself, and who was always an easy target when they wanted someone to laugh at. Back then, he was the misfit of Rutherford Academy, the private school where wealth and arrogance were worn like uniforms, just as much as the pressed blazers and polished shoes. He had no designer watch on his wrist, no family business waiting for him after graduation, no friends who spoke up when others mocked him. His clothes were faded, his sneakers worn thin, and his voice so quiet that even when he answered a teacher's question correctly, it was like a whisper swallowed by the room. To his classmates, he was invisible until they wanted to make him visible as the butt of their jokes. They labeled him weird, a loser, someone destined to fade into nothingness the moment high school ended. And now, after 5 years, those same classmates had decided to gather again under the glittering lights of a reunion banquet, sending out invitations not out of kindness, but out of cruelty. They thought bringing Marcus back would give them one more chance to remind him of who he used to be, one more opportunity to laugh at the kid they had written off as a failure. The invitation came to him in the most unceremonious way, tucked between a stack of unpaid bills and discount flyers on his kitchen table. The envelope was plain, but the handwriting on the front was familiar. Too neat, too carefully shaped, like someone had tried to disguise their arrogance with false elegance. Class of 2018 Reunion, Rutherford Academy Banquet Hall. Marcus stared at it longer than he expected to. At first, there was no surge of nostalgia, no rush of excitement to see familiar faces. Instead, there was silence, a kind of heavy stillness that filled the room. He brushed his thumb over the folded flap, tracing the curve of the inked letters. The name of the venue stood out most, the very same school hall where laughter had echoed at his expense, where his presence had been tolerated but never accepted. Memories came back sharp and uninvited. The two bright lockers, the sound of sneakers against polished floors, the smell of lemon polish that never masked the scent of belonging he lacked. He saw himself again as a boy, shoulders bent, clutching his books like a shield, the only black kid in a sea of white uniforms. His grades had been perfect, his teachers had praised him, yet none of it mattered in a place where being different was the only sin. He should have thrown the invitation away. Should have tossed it into the pile of junk mail and forgotten about it. But Marcus didn't. He let the paper sit in his hand while the memories played out, and then, unexpectedly, a small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. It wasn't the smile of someone longing for reconciliation or hoping to mend old wounds. It was the smile of someone who knew what others didn't. Because the boy they had once mocked had changed in ways they couldn't imagine. 5 years had passed and those years had not been wasted. They had been forged in fire, the fire of rejection, failure, and perseverance. Marcus had spent countless nights in front of a glowing laptop, coding through fatigue, building ideas that crumbled and starting again when the world told him to quit. He endured endless doubts, his own included, until the day one of his projects finally broke through. From there, the dominoes fell in his favor, each success building on the last until his name was whispered in boardrooms and written across investor lists. He was no longer the quiet kid they dismissed. He was the CEO of a rising tech empire, a man with a net worth that crossed $100 million. Yet he lived humbly, quietly, without the need for flashy cars or sprawling mansions. He had grown powerful in silence, and no one from Rutherford Academy had a clue. Marcus set the envelope down and looked at himself in the crooked mirror hanging on his wall. The reflection staring back was tired but steady. His hoodie sleeves were stretched, his sneakers scuffed, and his posture relaxed. Nothing about his appearance revealed the success he had built. And for the first time he realized that was exactly how he wanted it. He didn't need the world to see the wealth stitched into his pockets. He didn't need validation from the people who once called him nothing. But if they wanted to invite him as a joke, if they wanted to laugh one more time, then let them. Let them believe he was still the same boy they used to mock. Let them gather with their smug smiles and hollow pride, thinking they had written his story for him. Because this time, when he walked into that hall, the laughter would not land the way they expected. It would choke in their throats. Their smirks would collapse into silence. This reunion would not be a night of humiliation for Marcus Greene. It would be the stage where the truth stood taller than their arrogance. He picked up the envelope again, slid it into the pocket of his jacket, and drew in a slow, steady breath. He was not going there to fit in. He was not going there to beg for recognition. He was going there for one reason, to remind himself and to remind them that the labels they had pinned on him no longer held any weight. The loser they invited to laugh at would be the man who owned the very stage they stood on. The night of the reunion arrived with the kind of chill that clings to your skin. Rain fell in soft freckles against Marcus's hoodie as he made his way toward Rutherford Academy's banquet hall. The building stood tall and gleaming, its glass doors polished to a shine that seemed to demand reverence. Inside, the air carried the sterile scent of lemon polish, mixed with perfume and champagne, everything staged to perfection as if the very walls were trying to prove the success of those gathered within. Gold balloons arched high above a folding table where name tags sat neatly arranged in rows, each one a reminder of a past identity. Marcus stepped inside, the warmth of the room swallowing him whole, and searched for his name among the printed cards. Marcus Greene, the letters spelled out in looping ink, pinned to his hoodie like an afterthought. The needle caught on a loose thread as he pressed it through the fabric, and for a moment he felt the tug of history pulling at him. Heads began to turn, not dramatically, not all at once, but in a ripple that spread from the bar to the photo booth. A hush swept briefly through the chatter, just long enough for him to hear the shifting tone in the room. The buzz resumed after a heartbeat, but thinner now, stretched tight with smirks and muffled whispers. "Yo, that's him, right?" a voice murmured behind a pillar. "Same hoodie. Same vibe. Told you he never changed." Another voice joined, low and mocking. "I heard he's stacking shelves somewhere. Probably still living with his aunt. Wow, 5 years and nothing." The laughter that followed was soft but sharp, like a blade pressed just enough to remind him it was there. Marcus didn't react. He adjusted his cuff, rubbed his thumb along the crease of the envelope still in his pocket, and kept walking, his steps cushioned by the thick carpet that lined the hall. The banquet was staged like a performance. A projector hummed, flashing a slideshow of high school photos against the stage. There were the athletes in their lacrosse jerseys, the smiling faces at prom, the polished winners of science fairs. Tyler Voss, the self-appointed host with a grin too tight to be natural, tapped the microphone and called for attention. "Reunited and richer," he shouted with a forced laugh, and the crowd cheered. Marcus chose a table at the back, half-shadowed but with a clear view of the stage, and poured himself a glass of water. He didn't sip yet. He just watched. Watched the way people shifted when they saw him, watched the way their eyes skipped over his face as if contact might force them to remember what they had done years ago. Whitman, one of the old cheerleaders, drifted past him with a champagne flute in hand. Her earrings caught the light as she leaned close, her smile polished but her eyes hollow. "What's up, stranger?" she said, her tone sweet but dismissive. "You look vintage." She didn't wait for an answer before floating away again, as if talking to him too long might tarnish her gloss. At the bar, Marcus noticed Chase fumbling with a credit card. The machine beeped, that undeniable chirp of decline. The bartender turned the screen discreetly, too professional to announce the failure out loud. But Marcus caught the flicker of embarrassment on Chase's face as he hurried to try another card. He had always been the loudest about his so-called startups, and even now he was trying to mask collapse with bravado. Tyler's voice boomed again from the stage. All right. Quick games then and now." More photos rolled across the screen. Old classmates beamed from glossy pictures, their current achievements displayed underneath. Lawyers, Pilates studio owners, real estate agents. Then came Marcus's slot. The frame lit up only with a blank gray square and the words "photo not provided." A snort broke the silence. Then laughter. Tyler faked a look of pity. "Guess some stories don't upload," he said with mock sadness, and the room erupted again. Marcus raised the glass of water to his lips, sipped, and set it down slowly. The condensation left a ring on the table, which he wiped away with one careful circle of his sleeve. His heartbeat stayed steady. He was calm, almost too calm for the storm around him. 2 girls drifted behind his table, their whispers carrying closer than they realized. "Who even invited him?" one asked, her voice sharp with disdain. "Tyler," the other replied with a chuckle. "Said it'd be hilarious. Full circle, you know? Savage." Their laughter felt like déjà vu, the same cruel tones he had heard echoing in the hallways years ago. Brooke reappeared then, dragging along Chase and Roman. She tilted her chin at Marcus, her smile stretched thin. "So, Marcus," she said, her voice dripping with curiosity that wasn't curiosity at all. "What's the grind these days? Still into computers?" Marcus nodded once. "Something like that," he answered. Chase jumped in before he could say more. "We're all building things, you know," he said loudly, tugging at his blazer sleeve. "Startups, exits coming. Just a matter of timing. Market's weird, rent's weirder," he added, covering the cracks in his confidence with words. The awards began soon after, each certificate a flimsy sheet bordered with gold foil. Best glow up. Most international. Biggest boss energy. The jokes grew crueler, wobbling like a stack of Jenga blocks on the edge of collapse. Tyler's grin tightened each time the laughter faltered, but he pushed on. At last he lifted a final envelope high. "Honorable mention," he said, his voice gleaming with smugness. "Most likely to still be different. Marcus Greene, you around?" Heads turned. The room tensed, expectant. A few coughed, laughter breaking like glass. Marcus didn't flinch. He slid his chair back with a soft scrape and stood. His nod was small, almost polite, the kind of gesture that could have meant thanks or refusal or nothing at all. Then he sat again. The silence lingered for a moment, then scattered, retreating into gossip. "Why'd he even come?" someone whispered. "Content," another joked. "We needed a villain or a mascot." But a softer voice, barely audible, muttered, "He's calm. That's not nothing." The projector droned on. The vents whispered. Glasses clinked as people toasted themselves, pretending their lives were brighter than they were. Marcus folded the corner of his napkin, then folded it again, patient hands turning it into a tiny square as the storm of arrogance swirled around him. He stayed still, the way one stays still at the center of a hurricane, watching, waiting, knowing the winds would eventually exhaust themselves. The night wore on, and the room pulsed with shallow energy, the kind of forced cheer that cracked under closer inspection. The DJ kept the music thumping from rented speakers, but it couldn't hide the frayed edges in the atmosphere. Conversations rose too loudly, laughter pitched too high, every sound straining to cover insecurities that clung like smoke. Marcus sat quietly at his table, his water glass empty now, his hoodie dampened at the cuff where he had wiped away condensation rings again and again. Around him, classmates floated in their bubbles of pride, but every brag came with a shadow. Chase bragging of investors while his phone buzzed with overdue notices, Brooke tossing shrimp tails into half-empty glasses as if to prove she didn't care, Tyler still clinging to the microphone like a lifeline, his jokes growing thinner with every passing minute. Marcus let the noise flow around him. He didn't need to answer their whispers, didn't need to rise when they tried to bait him with mockery. He understood something they didn't, that arrogance collapses under its own weight if you wait long enough. So he sat in the eye of the storm, building patience with each fold of his napkin, with each steady breath. Yet as calm as he looked, the air around him grew taut. People noticed, even if they didn't say it out loud. There was something unsettling about the way he didn't fight back, the way he didn't shrink either. He was still. Stillness that carried weight. Stillness that hinted at a truth they couldn't see yet. The evening edged toward its climax when Tyler shuffled the cue cards in his hands, preparing to announce the final sponsor for the night. All right, he called, his voice booming but losing polish. "None of this would be possible without the generous support of our sponsor, Summit Gatherings." He flipped the card and paused. The last one was blank. His grin faltered for a split second before he forced it back. "Well, they've asked to remain anonymous." He gestured toward the decorations, the champagne, the catered spread. "But hey, round of applause anyway." Hands clapped politely, the sound thin like paper tearing in the air. That was the moment Marcus rose. The scrape of his chair against the tiles sliced through the music, louder than it should have been, a sound that made heads turn. He didn't rush, didn't stumble. He moved with deliberate steadiness, each step measured as he crossed the floor toward the stage. The chatter thinned as he climbed the steps, the projector humming behind him. Tyler shifted uncomfortably, mic in hand, his smile stretched too tight. Marcus didn't reach for the microphone immediately. He simply stood there, adjusting his sleeve, letting the silence lengthen until it felt like the walls themselves were leaning closer. The glasses stopped clinking. The laughter stopped dying in throats. The entire hall leaned into the weight of waiting. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice was low but clear. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight," he said. His eyes swept across the crowd, steady, unshaken. "And I want to thank our sponsor, Summit Gatherings, which is really just me." A flicker of confusion rippled across the room. Nervous laughter bubbled from a corner but didn't last. Marcus reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone and tapped the screen once. The projector flickered, the slideshow of old photos vanishing into black. Then, slowly, a series of headlines appeared. Greene Technologies raises $40 million in Series B funding. Another headline, the new face of AI infrastructure. Then a Forbes cover photo, Marcus older but unmistakably him, sharp suit, quiet confidence in his eyes. Gasps broke through the silence, disbelief scattering across the room. "That's him," someone whispered too loudly. "No way," another voice stammered. "Photoshop." But the projector kept rolling, headline after headline, article after article. TechCrunch features investor profiles, a line of text across the screen. Estimated net worth, $100 million. The weight of the words pressed down like stone. People scrambled for their phones, thumbs flying across screens, blue light painting disbelief on their faces. One by one, confirmation spread like wildfire. The headlines were real. The articles were true. Marcus Greene wasn't just successful. He was untouchable. The silence that followed was unlike anything the hall had held before. It wasn't the silence of mockery or the pause before laughter. It was heavy, suffocating, a silence that made throats close and palms sweat. Tyler's practiced grin slipped, his hand shaking slightly on the microphone. Chase tugged at his blazer sleeve, his eyes darting down as if ashamed of even being seen. Brooke's glass trembled in her hand, the champagne fizzing too loudly against the ring. Whispers darted across the room like sparks. Is this real? Check Google. I told you he was always different. Phones lit up everywhere, screens glowing proof. Each notification was another nail sealing the truth. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calm presence commanded more attention than any shout ever could. So when you ask what I do now, he said softly, something like this. He slipped his phone back into his pocket, leaving the projector frozen on a single line of text. Net worth, $100 million. The light from the screen cast his shadow long across the stage, a silhouette that stretched toward the crowd. He smiled then, small and quiet, the kind of smile that didn't need explanation. For a heartbeat, no one moved. It was as if the room itself had been caught in the projector's light, frozen in disbelief. That was the moment arrogance collapsed. You could see it ripple through them, the realization, the shame, the regret. The same mouths that had once sneered now pressed shut. The same eyes that had rolled now couldn't meet his gaze. The same voices that had mocked him now whispered in disbelief. Their laughter had turned against them, echoing only in memory, a cruel joke that no longer fit. Tyler lowered the microphone slowly, his hands uncertain now, the spotlight no longer his to command. The once confident host who had cracked jokes at Marcus's expense stood shrunken, his grin brittle and false. Chase shifted in his chair, tugging at his sleeve, his bravado leaking out in silence. Brooke placed her glass down carefully, as though afraid even the faintest clink would draw attention to her shame. Around the hall, whispers threaded through the air, sharp and frantic. Why'd we laugh? Someone murmured. Because we thought he'd never be anything, came the broken reply. Now he's everything we said he couldn't be. The words hung like smoke, lingering, impossible to sweep away. Marcus stepped closer to the edge of the stage. The light caught him, casting his shadow across the polished floor, stretching toward the tables where his former classmates sat frozen. His voice carried steady, no anger, no bitterness, only truth. You see, what you once called weird was vision. What you called failure was patience. And what you laughed at became the reason you are standing in a hall I paid for tonight. The silence that followed was heavier than any roar of applause could have been. It pressed on their shoulders, turned their pride into lead. Marcus wasn't raising his voice, wasn't gloating. His calmness made the shame cut deeper. He looked out over the sea of faces that once sneered at him in the hallways. Eyes avoided his gaze, some lowered, some darting nervously, some glassy with realization. Years ago their laughter had chased him through corridors. Tonight that laughter existed only as a ghost. His presence was the mirror they never wanted to face. Marcus let the silence expand, his pause deliberate, giving each of them a chance to hear the echoes of their cruelty in their own minds. Then, in words measured and firm, he continued. The difference between us isn't luck. It isn't chance. It's what we chose to believe about ourselves and about each other. You chose arrogance. I chose vision. The words struck like a gavel closing an argument. Some classmates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, the weight of their own choices pressing down harder than the expensive suits on their shoulders. A few tried to smile, tried to pretend this was just another performance, but their faces betrayed them. The shame was too thick, too real. Tyler stared at his cue cards as if they might rewrite the evening, as if words on paper could erase what was carved into reality. They couldn't. Nothing could. Marcus descended from the stage, each step steady, deliberate. No one stopped him. No one dared. He walked past the tables, past the champagne and the hollow trophies of self-congratulation, past the classmates who had once looked through him as if he were invisible. The room parted like water, his classmates shrinking back instinctively. He didn't rush. He didn't look back. The weight of silence trailed him all the way to the doors. Outside, the night air wrapped around him, cool and sharp against his skin. The rain had stopped, leaving the world damp and gleaming under streetlights. He drew a breath that felt like freedom, a breath unchained from years of ridicule. For the first time in his life, the label of loser was gone, not because he had shouted it away but because he had outgrown it. The stage they tried to bury him on had become the platform that proved them wrong. He had not just survived their cruelty, he had conquered it. Marcus walked down the steps, his sneakers damp against the pavement, his hoodie clinging lightly from the drizzle. He didn't need applause, didn't need to hear them admit their mistakes. Their silence was louder than any words they could offer. He knew the truth. They knew it too. That was enough. Success had spoken for him, louder and clearer than vengeance ever could. Yet as he walked into the night, his thoughts turned inward. This wasn't only about proving them wrong. It was about proving himself right. All those years of quiet persistence, all those lonely nights coding with tired eyes, all the failures that stacked up like walls, none of it had been wasted. The ridicule, the whispers, the isolation had been fuel. What they had used to break him had become the fire that forged him. And in that moment, Marcus realized the deeper truth. He didn't need their validation. He never had. Back inside, the hall remained silent, broken only by the faint hum of the projector still frozen on his name and net worth. His classmates sat still, faces stiff, each of them left with their own reflection to wrestle with. The boy they had mocked had become the measure against which their arrogance crumbled. The storm they had unleashed years ago had returned, but this time it was not Marcus caught in the winds, it was them. Marcus walked farther down the quiet street, each step echoing softly in the night. The cool air carried a peace that no amount of money could buy, a peace earned through patience and resilience. He thought of the boy he had once been, the boy clutching books too tightly, the boy who walked alone through halls that echoed with laughter not his own. That boy had carried every insult, every rejection, every whisper. And now that same boy had walked out of the banquet hall victorious. As he turned the corner, Marcus let out a small smile. Not the smile of triumph over others, but the smile of someone who had learned that the truest victories are not shouted, not flaunted, but lived. His story wasn't about humiliating his classmates, though that had happened naturally. His story was about enduring, about choosing vision when others chose cruelty, about believing in himself when no one else did. And so, the night ended not with applause, not with confrontation, but with a man walking into the darkness free from every label ever forced upon him. The loser they once mocked was gone forever. In his place was someone stronger, someone who had turned pain into power, silence into strength, and humiliation into history. And as the lights of Rutherford Academy faded behind him, Marcus carried forward not their laughter, not their shame, but his own unshakable truth. So I ask you now, if you were in Marcus's shoes, if you had been mocked, underestimated, and dismissed, would you reveal your success as he did, letting silence crush your doubters, or would you walk away quietly, knowing the truth needs no stage? Perhaps the answer lies in this. The greatest revenge is not anger nor pride, but success that speaks for itself. And Marcus Greene had spoken louder than anyone ever could.